You might think that racing and the looter-shooter genre don't have a lot in common, and you'd be wrong about that. You want loot, you want it fast, some mission types are pretty linear, bam, you got yourself a racetrack.
Alright, so we'll just explain it again. Energy pads pulse 4 times. When this symbol starts to drop down, not when the pad disappears, but when the symbol starts to drop down, you can go. And this is the only energy you get, so you can't use gear items, you can't use operator. There are a couple of frames that are banned, but besides that, you can use like any of your weapons, any warframe, any abilities. There are no other restrictions. Arcanes are fine. And now we go. Oh boy, that's fast. Wow. Oh boy. Oh baby. That's a speedy boy. This may be the first time I'm... Okay, well, I messed that up. It's fine because we're ridiculously fast. Ah, got him. So close, though, for you. So now they can guess which way extraction is, but of course they'll get it wrong, and they got it right. Okay, and we're catching up. And first person to extraction gets a point as well, and I can't dive under there. There we go. No! No, my empire, no! Okay, no, it's fine. Just push down your feelings, push down your feelings. And I think it's here. Where are we going? Where even? Okay, it was actually just straight. Probably lost that one. And then whoever gets to extraction first gets the... Oh boy, wow, that was a lot faster than me. Oh, it wasn't actually that far. That's a shame. Oh, who got it? Good race, and that's it. And then you go 3-5 times until there's a clear winner. So that would be me with 1 point and Gary with 1 point. And then we would keep it going. Sometimes when you capture a target in a mission, it turns into an exterminate, and then this happens. Cap target. That's me. Now they can guess which way extraction is, but there's no way they will because this tile's really confusing. And they guessed wrong. Or actually, I have no idea where it is. And it became an exterminate. Literally the worst possible example. Now we just quit the mission. Okay, we're doing it again. Sometimes after you cap a target, the capture mission becomes an exterminate, and then there isn't really a way to race to extraction. So my rule is that if it becomes an exterminate, the capture target is worth 2 points. But obviously, as an example of DriftFrame for people seeing it for the first time, that's a pretty terrible example. So that was really unlucky. The kicker, of course, is that 700,000 people already know about DriftFrame because there was that one tier list video that did rather well. And so those of you who already know about it are probably more interested in what the HELMINTH system did to DriftFrame, because now we can give every Warframe an ability, a chosen ability from another Warframe, or some of the abilities that are specific to the HELMINTH system. And oh, would you look at that? One of them is the fastest speed ability in the game, and it gives parkour velocity as well as sprint speed. So now you don't have to pick one or the other. Oh, and so this is really good. There isn't really an opportunity cost to infusing this either. There aren't really other abilities for racing that are particularly viable or competitive compared to this for raw speed. There are some dashes that are okay, and Saren's Molt is infusible, but it's slower than this, only by a little bit, but it's slower. And it doesn't give you parkour velocity, and it has a slower duration, shorter duration. So you just put this on every Warframe, basically. So what does that do? You put this on every Warframe, and everybody is really fast. In the old tier list, this means that every single frame in the game is A tier, except for one. We'll get back to that later. And then you pick up the pieces. So what we're going to do is talk about what baseline speed every Warframe has. Basically what you can get with basically no opportunity cost. You just have it on every Warframe. They're all that fast. And then we'll go through and talk about each individual Warframe and how they're affected by this stuff. As you will see, I think that Loki is in a really scary, powerful place here, but we will get there. First, we're going to talk about, again, the stuff that you can always have. Now, we explained before that you can't use focus. We can't stop you from equipping Xeneric passively, but you can't use your operator. You can't actively use focus. And you can't use gear items. The person starting the race, almost always me, is going to drop an energy pad, but then you can't use gear items. Besides that, though, you can use whatever you want. You can use a companion, of course, and you can use weapons. So kind of the core for any racing frame is a primary that is a rifle, so not a shotgun, because then you can equip Amalgam Serration, and this just makes you faster. Basically for free, you will, and we'll talk about why later, want a weapon that's good at getting headshots pretty automatically, and the Ignis Wraith and a number of other rifles are quite serviceable at that, so you might as well just use that. And then a melee weapon, it might as well be Tellus Boltace. There are a few other weapons that have things that are sort of relevant. Karist Prime, for example, gives you 10% passive sprint speed, or ground speed or something. 10% is really just not that much. With the amount of sprint, where we're going, we don't need 10% sprint speed, but it does technically exist. Kogake Prime gives like 5%. It doesn't really matter, but it is an option. Tellus Boltace gives you passive parkour velocity, rather a lot. I think it's around 20%. We don't know exactly, that's what it feels like. And so you might as well equip this. It makes you bullet jump faster. And your melee weapon can also carry Dispatch Overdrive, which can allow you to get some more speed, a pretty significant amount of speed. This is not so hard to activate as it might seem, because you can do a heavy slam. So doing a directional melee slam can be a good way to move around and jump between environments. And that also triggers Dispatch Overdrive if you do a heavy attack slam, which is really good. A nice thing about a heavy attack slam too, you can't do a heavy attack in midair without some finagling. And so if you hit the heavy attack key while you're in midair, you will do a slam. You don't have to worry about the angle being not quite right. So it's something you want to do anyway, and this gives you free speed whenever you do that thing. I happen to have a Riven that increases my attack speed. This increases your animation time, or your animation speed, which decreases the animation time, which is nice because it means when you get that landing from doing a slam, it ends faster. Not really a big deal. You can get an awful lot of speed even without that nowadays, but anyway. And that's pretty much it. I think that for companions, it's pretty much Worm or like a Sahasa Kubro. So Worm, it's for crowd dispersion. When you're capturing the target, this can knock enemies away from you. And if you would randomly get status procs, the most common time this happens is on Corpus tile sets. There are barrels that can proc cold on you if you explode them, and this can prevent that. That's very rarely relevant, but this ability is pretty much the most helpful thing for capping the target, so you might as well just bring this as well. And then I bring the Volcax. This is a burst weapon. Doesn't do very good damage overall, but it does it very quickly, and when you're running past enemies really, really fast, a lot of the weapons don't really do anything, so you might as well have this. It does something, you know. The other frame companion that you might want is a Sahasa Kubro for dig. This can be used if your Warframe is going to be very energy hungry. You can bring a Sahasa Kubro instead, lose relatively little, though the worm with the Volcax is not doing much. And then you have this to dig up a bunch of energy orbs. Now this won't do that reliably when you're running, but at the beginning of the mission, energy pads only give you so much energy. So if you have a frame that's going to be really energy hungry, you can run primed flow and then bring a Sahasa Kubro and it will top you up. You'll have a lot more energy with a very low opportunity cost. So that's a possibility. Definitely still matters. There's some opportunity cost there, but not too much. And that's it. That's pretty much the buildcraft basics. Another thing that you can bring, if you so chose, would be a kit gun that can give you Pax Bolt. I'm not entirely convinced that it's the best idea to spend time trying to activate this in the middle of a mission, but you could use a primary kit gun that could do it at the same time. This would give you a little more strength and efficiency on a Helminth ability or your speed ability on your Warframe if you wanted to. I'm not sure how productive that is, but it's a thing that you can try. So anyway, that's possible. Personally, I'm going to stick with this, but a suggestion that people have mentioned is using a kit gun that is primary gaze, because the field is pretty good at getting headshots. So you could use that, and it should be able to use Amalgam Serration, and you can proc Pax Bolt. So we could try that. We'll leave that on for a bit. But anyway, you're not gaining much is the point. Then for Warframes, the main thing to know is Arcane Consequence. So if you get a headshot, not a headshot kill, just a headshot, which some weapons can do quite reliably, you get parkour velocity quite a bit. And so that's really powerful. There are a few other relevant arcanes here. One of them, the aptly named Arcane Agility. This gives you parkour velocity when you take damage, but it's not guaranteed. A lot of the time you will literally not take damage for the whole race. So I do think that this is a little unreliable. One thing this is pretty good for is if you get the cap target, you've already gotten a point, you're gonna be a little behind in all likelihood. Other people can guess which way extraction is. One of them will probably guess correctly. So you will be worse off than at least one other person. You've already gotten a point, of course, so that's fine. That's meant to be a balancing element in DriftFrame. But the advantage of this is that while capping the target, you will activate this in all likelihood. Enemies will be attacking you. And so this does help you catch up. So that's something to keep in mind. a non-insignificant decision, but there are decisions to make. I mean, there are options. There are some relevant arcane helmets, and we'll talk about them as they come up, but arcane helmets are discontinued. You can't get them anymore. You can just trade for them with other players. A lot of them cost exorbitant amounts of platinum, so we're not going to talk about that too much. Not very many of them make a difference, and so I wouldn't worry about it, but they are a thing that is in the game that technically makes you better off in some situations by a little bit. So again, I'll tell you what they are, just like when we go through the tier list. I'm going to tell you what the sprint speed of the Warframe is, but it doesn't really matter that much because everybody has kind of close sprint speed, and now they all have infested mobility. So there are a few cases where the sprint speed can vary a lot or it matters a little bit, but not very much. And again, if your sprint speed was really bad and it did matter, you could just bullet jump. And I'll give you a little spoiler. If you don't have a speed ability, bullet jumping is faster than running on the ground with infested mobility. So there's also just more sources of parkour velocity than bullet jumping. I mean, than running on the ground, than speed. You get more sources of parkour velocity than sprint speed for free, right? So in your kind of basic loadout, if you imagine Loki here has no mods, or even if you do imagine having mods, you get more parkour velocity than sprint speed. So you generally want to be bullet jumping anyway, unless you have a speed ability. And if you have another speed ability, it really doesn't matter what your sprint speed is. So it doesn't really matter, and that's why. But I will tell you them just because, for goodness sakes, it's a tier list of speed. What are you going to do? Obviously, you should take a view toward these things that nothing is sacred. And so if you can think of a way to gain something, then sure, gain it. So what we're trying to figure out is if a Warframe doesn't have anything relative to DriftFrame, but they do get infested mobility, should they run or bullet jump? I think they should bullet jump, but I would like to know for sure. Are you timing this? No, I don't think that there's a point to that. You could try to very specifically compare exact speeds, but I think that if there's no clear difference, then in a real mission, you're going to do the one that makes sense in the environment. And so if they're relatively comparable, we just can't make a conclusion about that. And measuring exactly which one is faster, there's a variety of reasons I don't want to do that. So I think that's pretty much it. We can talk about the previous tier list as a starting point, but I don't think there's a lot to say. This is our preliminary tier list. I might change things around as we go through, but we did already talk about this during this stream, so I think that it will be something like this. Keep in mind that we haven't really raced with this new state of things, and also keep in mind that because of infested mobility, these tiers are a lot closer than they were before. It used to be that F tier was like no speed at all, and A tier was crazy speed by comparison, but now D tier is the old A tier from the previous tier list, where it was like Volt and Zephyr and Saren who had speed abilities, and now D tier is just everybody has that. So that's A tier, and then this is A plus tier, A plus plus tier, A plus 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 tier, and the frames that are still banned. And then there's Lavos because he has cooldowns on infested mobility. So keep in mind that the meaning of a tier list for this activity is much less important than it used to be. However, I do think that there's a lot of interesting stuff to say in these tiers, and there are a few things down here that you can kind of fiddle around with, including arcane helmets. For this version of this tier list, I've disregarded arcane helmets, and the reason I did that, even though I've included them in the past, I didn't include them at first, then I included them, and now I'm taking them out. The reason is that now everybody has so much sprint speed and parkour velocity that the marginal benefit of any arcane helmet, whether it's sprint speed or parkour velocity, and no matter how good it is, even the best ones, I'm looking at you, Nyx, I guess kind of looking at you, Rhino, but Nyx is the big one, has significant parkour velocity on her arcane helmet, but in the context of how much bullet jump velocity you can now have, it just doesn't really matter that much. So this is pretending that you don't have them. I honestly do not think it changes any of these placements, even if you do have them. We'll talk about them as they come up, but I don't think it really matters. So, having said all of that, let's discuss. So, going in tier list order, we have F tier with one lone citizen, and that's Lavos. F tier on this tier list, as I mentioned before, is the equivalent of what was B tier on the previous tier lists. D tier on this tier list is just infested mobility and then nothing else worth using, and that would be A tier on the previous tier list. So keep in mind, Lavos might be F tier, but that's still really good if you think about the previous tier list. Why is Lavos F tier? Well, it's kind of a complicated reason. When Lavos infuses an ability with the HELMINTH system that is not one of his own abilities, Lavos, you may notice, doesn't have any abilities that have a duration exactly. Transmutation Probe and Catalyze, you send out the droids, but all of his abilities, you use them and then they go on cooldown. Lavos' mechanic being that he doesn't have energy, he just has cooldowns. When you infuse an ability with the HELMINTH system, no matter which slot you infuse it in, it gets given a cooldown, and the cooldown, as far as we know right now, is the energy cost broken into 25 energy segments, and then that's 5 seconds per 25 energy. So if you infuse an ability with a 50 energy cost, it has a 10-second cooldown. Why does that matter? That's amazing, you might be saying, because it means that Lavos can spam infested mobility and not pay any energy for it, right? No. The way that they work is that until the duration of the ability ends, you don't get the cooldown. So Lavos can use infested mobility for, 15, 20 seconds or whatever, and then you get a 10-second cooldown where you just can't use it, which is not made up for by Transmutation Probe. Vile Rush is okay, but not that fast compared to how fast I've shown you can go. It's not enough. And ultimately that means that the one source of speed that everybody gets, Lavos can't use as much as everybody else can. F tier. Now we go into D tier, and these are going to be a lot of Warframes where I know it seems unexciting to not demonstrate them, but for a lot of D tier, there's nothing to demonstrate. And then we get up here, there's a lot more to say. Another thing is that if we don't do it that way, then we're going to be here forever, and my HELMINTH will not have enough resources left for me to infuse infested mobility in 40 different Warframes. So, D tier, we're going to plow through it. Atlas. In fact, are we really going to pull up each individual one? Sure we are. Atlas has his punches, his lock-on punches from Landslide. Now, these do let you move maybe a little faster than just totally nothing speed. You had no sprint speed or parkour mods on. Maybe you could somehow get movement out of this ability, but not really. Even with the basic speed, not really. And certainly not with infested mobility. It's better to just dash. Atlas is very tanky. There are plenty of options in the higher tiers that are also very tanky, so I don't think it's worth much to be just infested mobility, but you were very tanky. Atlas is a great example here because it'll be the first of a few frames that have a dash ability, but it's inferior to using infested mobility, so they're in D tier, even though they don't have nothing. And so, D tier. Moving right along, we have Banshee, who has nothing, so D tier. Baruuk, who has nothing, so D tier. Ember, who has nothing, so D tier. Frost, who has nothing, so D tier. Gara, who has nothing, so D tier. And Garuda has her other lock-on dash. Now, Garuda's is probably better than Atlas's in most situations. It goes really far, you might be thinking, and it can be fast. Well, there's a few problems. The first problem is that you lose your momentum when you arrive. When you use the dash and you arrive at your target, you stop, you stand still. You do have to have a target. There's going to be an enemy to target, and you have to build range. For infested mobility, you don't benefit from range. You want to spend your build space on duration and strength and on sprint speed or parkour velocity and stuff. So for this ability to be even okay, you have to also build range that you have no space for and make your infested mobility worse. And it's barely better than infested mobility. Not good, unfortunately. Grendel, D tier. However, the minigame where you play in meatball mode is very fun. You can go into Captura and you're gonna spawn an enemy, and in Captura you have infinite energy. So you can't go into meatball mode without an enemy in your stomach, but once you're in meatball mode, if you digest all the enemies, that's okay, you just consume energy. And in Captura you have infinite energy, so you can spawn in some dudes, nom 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 nom, and go meatball. And now you can stay like this forever and race around like this. And there's that you can boost and get there hardly anything affects it, but you can race around like this, and it's kind of fun if you just get everybody doing this. Sure, this is absolutely horrible in DriftFrame. It's very slow if you're not going downhill, and even when you're going downhill, it's surprisingly not that fast. It looks very fast because orbs, But it's not, yeah, see, like, this looks fast because you have this kind of intimate perspective when you're doing it. But you saw when I left Meatball and now suddenly I'm just bullet jumping normally, it's pretty fast. Like, this is a lot faster. It's fun, but not really viable for DriftFrame. I usually have people start over here at the back. You see that pylon over there? So you can start here, spawn the enemies, get everyone into Meatball, and then race to the entrance to the Plains of Eidolon. Not a very deep mode overall. There's not a lot there, but it's fun. Something worth a try. Yeah, anyway, Grendel is absolutely D tier. Next we have Harrow, who has nothing relevant to racing, so D tier. Inaros, nothing relevant to racing, D tier. Ivara. So Ivara is a very special member of this tier list because she has something very funny, and it is very fast. It's just totally impractical for setting up in an actual mission. Also, Ivara is my jellyfish bride, and nobody can change my mind. On a dash wire, Ivara can sprint without breaking her stealth, and there's an augment for Ivara's stealth, the Infiltrate augment, that gives you a speed modifier while in your stealth that is modifiable by strength. And then if you're on a dash wire, you can sprint with that speed modifier. And you could add infested mobility. You can't really set that up during a race and actually be coming out ahead, but technically, if you wished for such a thing for some dark purpose, you could, for example, apply just like all of the strength and then the Infiltrate augment. Here we have 74% movement speed, cool. And then you could dash wire, get on the dash wire and stealth, and then run, and you go, woo, boy, pretty fast. And if you get the right angle, you can really go flying. Let's see if we can set up one. Nice. Very, very fast, right? And that's not even with infested mobility. But the thing is, can you really set this up in the middle of a mission? Will there even be places to set this up in the middle of a mission? No, absolutely not. So anyway, very cool. I showed this in the first tier list, and I'm going to show it until the end of time, but it's terrible. I just wanted to show you my pretty waifu jellyfish Ivara fashion. That's really the only reason we're here. Limbo doesn't have anything, D tier. Mag doesn't have anything, D tier. Mesa doesn't have anything, D tier. Nekros doesn't have anything, D tier. Nidus doesn't have anything, D tier, although health regeneration. Nyx doesn't have anything, D tier. Oberon doesn't have anything, D tier. Revenant. Revenant has his dash, and you can use the spinny carousel of death move to make the dash not have a stagger at the end. I have not been convinced by people that this is better than using infested mobility, but just recently, you may have noticed that one of our test subjects was using this very tactic. And I have seen people try to animation cancel with Reeve. The idea is that you do like a stance combo or something that gives you a lot of forward momentum, and then Reeve saves that momentum. I have seen people do that and go fast. I don't think that's faster than infested mobility, so I'm saying D tier. Again, what's fun about this is that I might be totally wrong, and when we actually race, you'll see people go flying with some of these frames. But with my very educated guess, I'm going to say D tier. Rhino. Rhino has an arcane helmet, and Rhino's arcane helmet gives you sprint speed. It doesn't just give you sprint speed, it gives you base sprint speed. Oh yes, that means that Rhino has the fastest sprint speed of any Warframe in D tier. That might sound like it matters. There are two reasons why it does not matter. The first reason is that there are frames in that tier that have 1.2 sprint speed. So you might have the highest base sprint speed, not just 25% more speed, but 1.25 base sprint speed that's multiplied by everything else. More significant than having 25% more speed, but not by very much. Again, there are some frames that have 1.2, so it's really not much better. Any tiny bit better that it is counteracted by the fact that Rhino has an unusually small amount of max energy. There aren't a lot of Warframes whose prime variant has only 150 energy, so you have some things to contend with. You will not be able to maintain infested mobility for most of a race without significant concessions made in your build. That counteracts any benefit you get from this arcane helmet. Do not buy this. I spent the platinum so you don't have to. I swear this was like 500 platinum. It was a lot, okay? And I did it so that you don't have to. So please, accept my sacrifice. Don't give a crap about Rhino. Sorry, Rhino. You tried your best. Obviously, Rhino charge is not better than running with infested mobility. Trinity. Nothing relevant to racing, D tier. Valkyr. Valkyr has her rip lines These allow you to theoretically like reposition in midair or something. So you can, for example, be bullet jumping or what have you, and then use a rip line to pull yourself down to the ground. Previously, this was okay. You could do some alright stuff with it, but now we have directional slams with Melee 3.0, which is the exact same thing. It's often better. It really makes you go pretty fast. You can see this is kind of fast. It's okay, you know, but you do need to build range for it to go far away. You're noticing it's kind of not very good range at the moment because you do need to build range, so we've got that problem again. There are situations where your momentum gets all yucked up and you can just kind of redirect yourself, as you're seeing me doing. It really makes you feel like 3D maneuver gear, but it's not actually good. So, sorry Valkyr, D tier. Vauban. Vauban has an arcane helmet. I don't know if I have it. Let's find out. Arcane Gambit helmet. Yes, I do have it. I'm pretty sure that this gives less parkour velocity than the Nyx arcane helmet that gives parkour velocity. And I don't know if I think the Nyx parkour helmet that gives our arcane velocity, blah, 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 words, is very relevant. But note that Vauban does have an arcane helmet. I said I would mention them. The other thing about Vauban is a personal thing. So hopefully you'll humor me for a moment. My good dear viewers, folks, I want VectorPad to be good because it reminds me of Mario Kart. I don't really like Mario Kart at the moment, but I did when I was younger. I really enjoyed it. It was one of the first games that I played. The first game I played was Star Wars Pod Racer, so you can see how we ended up where we are today. I want Mine Layer VectorPad memes to be good in DriftFrame, but they're not. One of the reasons they aren't is because when you lay down a vector pad, that was a proton, okay? This doesn't work unless you hit it straight on. So if you go like this, right, you don't activate it. If you go like this, you don't activate it. You have to be at a pretty close angle for it to work. Now I've low strength on this random build, but you can see you have to hit it like pretty dead on. Even hitting it from the same angle, like kinda, is not enough. You really have to hit it dead on. It's very possible that you could be putting it right in front of you like this. You see, and it might affect you, but if you turn a little bit, it just won't. It's really bad. It's a bad ability in every part of the game that a lot of people really don't like, indeed. But I want it to be good. So I raise a bounty now. If you can show me something compelling with this ability, I will do something of note that you will like very much. I will make a video. Not gonna promise you what it'll be. But anyway, the die has been cast. There you go. Finally, we have Xaku, who is in D tier. Nothing relevant to racing. Sorry, Xaku. And now we're in C tier, so things get much more exciting because each of these there's actually something to say about. So let's get into it. Equinox. Equinox has a little speed ability. It's not the most exciting speed ability. When you use Metamorphosis and you go from night to day form, you get a speed increase that is affected by strength. As you can see, the base value is 15%, not very good. On the other hand, the energy cost is quite low and the duration is quite high. So it's quite likely that in the context of infested mobility, this is free. Because every Warframe has infested mobility now, Warframes that have speed abilities on top of infested mobility are gonna have to consider how reasonably they can maintain infested mobility and their own speed ability. If we were using Volt and Saren before, and they were fast, they had speed abilities, they paid energy, they had enough energy to finish a race with their speed ability, you might be thinking, well, infested mobility isn't more energy than, say, Saren's Molt, right? And it makes you faster. It should make you about twice as fast as having just Molt, right? So surely that means you'll finish the race in half the time, and then you don't have to worry about running out of energy. Well, we'll talk about this more when we get to Saren, but in practice, you can't actually control this level of speed. You saw a really good example when I was playing Loki at the beginning, where bullet jumping, with the amount of speed you can get now, you will overshoot things. It's just not really possible not to. Now, obviously, some degree of control and player skill can mitigate this, but for running on the ground, you have to accelerate too. So having a bunch of speed abilities does fall off a bit. On the other hand, Equinox is in the favorable position, relatively, of having a speed ability that, while it's not too powerful, it hardly costs anything. So it's kind of just a bonus on top of infested mobility. This is the type of thing that I have a feeling might be better than I'm giving it credit for, but I'm also a little bit worried that I'm underestimating how well people will be able to control the maximum speed of frames like Volt and Zephyr. So I've decided to put Equinox in C tier, and that's why. She might be a lot better than this, and we'll get back to this when we talk about Cora. Let's move on to Chroma. Chroma has a new passive recently where you can triple jump, so you can bullet jump twice. Let's put on a bunch of mods that make you bullet jump really far and see how that feels, shall we? And again, we don't even have infested mobility, so just keep that in mind. And we'll just use these. Again, we just have some respectable bullet jump ability. Pow. Pow. Feels okay. As you can see, when you kind of end the first bullet jump, you still have pretty significant forward velocity, so I'm not sure how valuable it is to be able to do that. You know, you're not really going faster, but over very long distances, and once you have a lot more parkour velocity, I have a feeling it will be better. And you can also see how when I'm turning and stuff, that gets pretty powerful. Like, that is quite nice, being able to just jet yourself in a different direction. So I've put Chroma at C tier. Again, the thing to keep in mind here is that D tier is basically just they have nothing except infested mobility, and then Lavos has less infested mobility. And then these frames are just infested mobility, which is already almost uncontrollably fast, but then they have more. So just keep in mind, it may be relatively arbitrary to say this is C, this is B, this is A, but that is the exercise that we are undertaking. I agree with Chat Gorioni, you said, I think the main benefit is that you can turn in the air, unlike other frames, with a bullet jump. That does seem rather valuable. It's also extra insurance for jumping off the map, as you can adjust once more. That's a very good point. That happened in my little intro race, and if you were Chroma, you would have been saved in that situation. Loki doesn't have anything that makes him bullet jump more, so being Chroma would have saved me in that case. I think Chroma will be really fun. I'm not sure how powerful this is, though, so I put him in C tier. Let's move on to Hildryn. Well, it's very simple. Hildryn doesn't spend energy. She spends her shields, and she has, well, rather a lot of shields, and so that means that you don't have to worry about running out of energy. However, Hildryn doesn't have any speed other than infested mobility. I don't think most frames are in that much danger of running out of energy with infested mobility. The big thing that Hildryn gains, really, is that you can build for infested mobility with abandon. You can throw your efficiency in the garbage, and you will still be able to maintain it. I think most of the time blind rage might be a mistake when you're building a build to race. I think that the efficiency is going to be a problem. But here, I don't see why you can't just throw on all the efficiency. I mean, strength. I would just say efficiency for every single stat. I'm talking about strength. And I do think Hildryn gains something for that. So I put Hildryn in C tier because I think the relative benefit of long races, you don't have to worry about running out of energy, which that will come up. And I do think you actually gain a bit of speed. That does actually make you a little faster, I think. But I don't think it matters that much. And on shorter tracks, I don't think it does basically anything. So I put her in C tier. I think this is also a good time to note that these tiers might be relatively close together. So for example, C and B tier, maybe not that different, but within the tier, they're certainly not equal. Like probably Hildryn is the lower end of C tier, much like Hydroid. Hydroid has his wave. Now, Hydroid's wave, is a move that moves you, you know? The thing is, so it's based on duration, so that's very good. We mentioned earlier how there were a few frames like Garuda who have dash abilities that might occasionally be relevant, but they're hamstrung by the fact that you need to build a stat that doesn't benefit infested mobility. This is the opposite. You get a dash ability that is pretty fast, and you're building a stat to make it good that does benefit infested mobility. So you just build duration. So if we simply put on all the duration, we'll just put on all the duration, and you'll see wave. It's very fast. That's extremely fast, and it doesn't have acceleration time either. You just go. You can even redirect in midair. However, you can't move vertically. You have slight gravity, as you can see. You kind of fall in a very small arc. For the most part, it doesn't really change your height or momentum. You just go at that speed for a certain amount of time, right? It's a really fast ability. I think what's going on here is that this is a dash ability that is just barely faster than infested mobility in some situations, but not by very much. And so you lose almost nothing by building for it. If you play Hydroid, you basically just also get Tidal Surge for free, and it's going to be close to being the best that it would be while you're building for Infested Mobility as well. You still have room to build some strength and a little sprint speed, so you have a good Infested Mobility, and then you also get this. I just don't think this gains you that much. I'm not even sure that it gains you anything at all, but I think of the dash abilities that maybe don't gain you anything, this is the one that feels like you might gain something. Problems with this ability, weaknesses of this ability, follow-ups are not pretty. Like if you want to do a follow-up one, it doesn't, you can cancel it, which is the nonsense you just saw me doing. So you can do that. That's insanity. Like if you can control that, that's pretty spicy. Not trying to say it isn't. But I do think that at that point, you're basically just doing what Gauss is doing or what Excalibur is doing with extra steps. So when we get to those, we'll come back to that. I think Hydroid is in C tier. Protea. Was very much looking forward to talking about Protea. Protea has some interesting tech because she can rewind. When you get to the capture target, you can cap them if you're there first, or if you're not there first, you can guess which way extraction is. But the thing is, you don't know. And if you guess wrong, then you're even worse off than the person who capped the target and is already a point ahead of you. Protea, however, can simply use her temporal anchor and then guess a direction. And then if you guess wrong, you could just go back very, very fast. And during this rewind, you are definitely faster than probably every frame in the game under any circumstances. You can just only go backwards. So that's, but it does let you kind of unguess. If you guess extraction wrong, you can just erase your guess and be about as well off as the person who did the capture target, right? You won't be ahead, but you're not really behind. If you guess correctly, it turns out you can cancel this ability. You just have to hold it instead of pressing it again, and then it cancels and you don't rewind. Good stuff. Additionally, yes, that's right, you can see it on the ability timer. Did I specifically cast 3 abilities so that it would be available? No, but if it makes you think better of me, then you can suppose that I did. You can use Protea's passive to give your Infested Mobility 100% more strength. Now, I think this is only reasonable at the very beginning of a race. I think realistically what you do is you'll get enough energy to fill up your energy gauge unless you use Prime Flow. So you just throw out a few grenade fans or whatever to get your thing up to your passive activated. You do, your old little boot. Now you've got your passive. And then at the beginning of the race, you cast Infested Mobility like that. 100% strength is a lot more speed. That's pretty good. And then if you build a bit more duration than normal rather than strength, and you can probably even sacrifice some efficiency and use Blind Rage, which might not be the best idea normally. And then that boosted Infested Mobility will last quite a while. Now, I don't think that you're going to activate this again. You can't recast Infested Mobility while it's active. You have to wait till the duration ends. So it's not like, even if you had the energy, it's not like you can just quickly tap Infested Mobility 3 times, even if you had infinite energy, and just go at the 100% increased speed again. You kind of can't do that. You could spend time throwing grenades. That might be reasonable. Personally, I think realistically, it's probably only that first Infested Mobility, but if you had 300% duration, like you see here, Infested Mobility would last 24 seconds. It's a base of 8 seconds, and it would cost 77 energy. So it's pretty feasible. You will probably have enough energy for a couple Infested Mobilities, and if you add a little energy somewhere else or you gain energy somewhere, you might be able to afford Temporal Anchor as well to do the rewind thing I showed before. In that case, I think you're gaining a lot. You have better duration and also better strength for most of the race, which I feel like that's pretty spicy. Should we try it? On top of all this speed that we're going to demonstrate with the boosted Infested Mobility, look at that. Already 145% sprint speed, 72% parkour velocity. Whew. Now, this is a case where we're seeing if you don't have some other speed ability, the parkour velocity is kind of better. We established earlier, and it's a lot better in this case because we don't have very much build room. We really want to save space on the build, so we in particular don't want sprint speed, which is more space consuming. Really, sprint speed feels relegated to if you have another significant sprint speed boost. And I think that's it. We can add Augur Secrets for a little bit more strength. Cool. This should be pretty fast. Now we'll boost it with the passive by casting some other stuff. Now we wait while keeping the consequence and stuff activated. Now boosted. Oh! Oh! Oof. Oh, right through the legs. Did you see that one? Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna... It's very impressive. Look at the... Whoa! Wow! The jump in particular, the somersault, Protea's like special somersault thing, in particular is ridiculously fast. Wow. Anyway, so yeah, crazy. That's the potentially, yeah, pretty solid. Wisp. Oh, well, Wisp. This is a kind of an odd one. The thing about Wisp is that you do have a speed buff, but it's very, very difficult to prevent other players from getting it. So for the purposes of racing, it's not particularly reasonable because you have to deploy the little well, and I don't know how you're going to do this and have other players not just also get it. You can try to deploy it in such a way where, you know, the range is small and you put it in a corner or whatever, and maybe it's right before you leave for the beginning of the race. Then it's kind of hard to get, which is something, I guess. You can deploy it by jumping really high. This is a thing that's been suggested. So you can do it like that. I think that the best thing is to deploy it while you're high up, and then people have to do this stupid thing to like get up there and get it, right? But I do think that what's going to happen is people are just going to dog you at the beginning. Like they're going to stay right on top of you, knowing that you're going to try to deploy it. That being said, this is a very significant speed buff. This is our first speed buff that is a bit more than some others. It's 20% at base, and it lasts a long time. The buff duration is, with duration, pretty much the whole race. So if you can deploy it at any time without giving it to other people, you get it for the whole race. You only have to do that one time. That's pretty good. That's not bad. You have to be careful about jumping out of the map. You need to be careful that when you jump up to do the thing, you don't just get out of the map and then you lose the buff, right? And like Infested Mobility, it's based on strength and duration. Lovely. So a very good match, right? And then Wisp, of course, has the other classic thing, which is Will-O-Wisp. You can use this when you get to the cap target, much like Protea's Rewind, to guess a direction that you think extraction will be, go a different way, and then whichever way it ends up being, you either leave your clone or you teleport to your clone. So you go that way, or let's say it was actually that way, then you teleport to your clone. So Wisp is, in a way, kind of better at guessing which way extraction is. And you can also do it if you are capping. Yes, that's right. You can deploy your clone, and remember, you have more duration than this if you make a proper build, and then cap. And then if you guess the correct direction with your clone, once you're done with the cap, you can just teleport ahead, and it's like you got to cap and guess which way extraction is. The only way that you don't get ahead is if you guess wrong, and even then, you're still just at the capture target. So it's strictly better than Protea, so maybe this should be B tier. The thing is, you don't have that bonus strength from Protea, but you do have that speed ability. I feel like that's kind of better. Ranking preliminary, more tests required. Correct. We'll leave Wisp here, and let's say watch this space. This is a predictive tier list. Let's just say keep an eye out. One small disadvantage about Wisp's prediction compared to Protea's prediction is that Wisp can, of course, only do it in a straight line. You have to guess which way to extraction by firing out your clone in a straight line. So and because you have a lot of speed, if you can get further along with your guess, like Protea can, you will want to be able to turn, and that means that Wisp's guessing is less powerful, but who knows by how much. I'm going to leave them where they are. This is a preliminary list. So let's move on to B tier. Ashe. Ashe is in B tier because of teleport. I previously thought that this wasn't very good for DriftFrame because Ashe can only teleport behind people, which means if you're not faster than them, yeah, I guess you can catch up, but at the most, you'll only be catching up to the back of them, right? And so you won't ever win. There's no second place. If there was second place, this would have been better before. But now that everybody has a speed ability, Ashe probably can keep up with everybody else. And so the ability to you know, you make a small mistake and then you can teleport to catch up to someone is relatively a lot better. So I do think that this is more powerful than before. This is also the tier where I start to care a lot more about what a frame's sprint speed is. So Ashe Prime sprint speed is 1.2. That matters relatively more because you will be neck and neck with other fast people. And I think that the fact that Ashe has a good base sprint speed is relevant at this point. A big thing to notice is that like Protea and Wisp, kind of the top of C tier, if you will, Ashe is also using a sort of teleport ability. Ashe's is a lot easier to get value out of, or like if you get it on target, you get value. And it's not just the capture target. You can theoretically at any time use it to catch up to people. The drawback with the teleport is that it doesn't do anything if you're ahead. Like if you're in the lead, then it doesn't help. And so that's not so good. I'm not sure that this should be in B tier. It's possible that this is less mobility than Protea and Wisp, but I chose to rate it B tier, and that's why. We shall see. Excalibur. Yeah, I mean, it's for slash dash. Slash dash is good for racing in that it's a dash move and you can easily chain it together. The problem with slash dash was always that you'd lock onto stuff. And the solution is to have infested mobility so that you can be running on the ground very quickly when you're near the ground. And when you have the headspace to use slash dash, you can just fly across any large amount of open space. I think this is more favorable than Hydroid, in the sense that you can do repeated ones maybe a little more reliably with more control, you get more vertical maneuverability. But realistically, is this better than the Wave? Is the Wave good? You have to build range for this to be powerful? Oh, I don't know. Maybe we should restructure a little bit, shall we? I flipped Ashe and Excalibur. As I was talking about them, I feel very strongly that the logic I used to put these frames in C tier applies directly to these. And by comparison, these are probably edging into B tier. Poor Excalibur. You've been taken down to C tier, but still okay. Being able to dash, having a decent dash that can go in kind of any direction, I do think that does matter some. Again, you have to build range, which really crowds the build for infested mobility. Korra. I have very positive feelings about Korra. Because Korra has a passive speed increase. She doesn't have to pay energy for it. See note at Equinox. The speed ability has the same base speed of 15% speed. Korra's is formatted differently. It says 1.15 speed multiplier. I don't know why this game is inconsistent about this stuff, but it's 15% speed. The thing is, this is always active forever with no energy if you have Venari alive. And in the context of a race, Venari is not going to die. It's free speed. I put Korra above Equinox because I think this is a minor benefit, but it's completely free. So obviously that's pretty good. If every Warframe has infested mobility, Korra is the only Warframe that is just faster completely for free. The only catch is she's not much faster. And remember, sprint speed is a thing as well, and Korra's base sprint speed is only 1.05. So yes, Korra does have 15% faster sprint speed passively, but her base sprint speed kind of exchanges for that. And there are a lot of Warframes around this tier, like Protea, for example, has, if I'm not mistaken, 1.2 sprint speed. Let's double check that. Oh, like, yeah, that's probably better, you know? And so it's very worth considering, indeed, 1.2, that Korra's totally free speed is not 100% amazing. It's just, not to be overstated. Still not bad. Mirage. Oh, Mirage. So this one I need to test. I assumed that Mirage's passive would be relevant, but I don't know for sure. Let's try it. Mirage's passive says sliding lasts 85% longer, whatever. Acrobatic maneuvers are 50% faster. What does it mean? Are they 50% more momentum? Do they end 50% faster? How work? And so we will boldly go and find out. This doesn't feel different at all. It feels exactly the same. What does this passive do? Does it do anything? It doesn't feel like it affects bullet jumps at all. The wiki says that it does, but it really doesn't feel like bullet jumps are actually any different. Don't they look exactly the same? The duration is what I'm talking about. It doesn't look it's not 50% faster, don't you think? I feel like this doesn't do anything. I feel like this is nothing. Okay, well anyway, Take it or leave it. This is why tier lists should be taken as a fun thing and not a scientific thing. Yeah, okay, whatever. Mirage has been downgraded to D tier. I was predicting that it would be a multiplier on bullet jump speed, but it doesn't look like it does basically anything. So she's going to D tier. Let's save and download a new version of the tier list again. Goodbye, Mirage. Octavia. Octavia has a speed buff that you get by jumping, and if you can get it, it is 30% speed, pretty big. That's bigger than anything we've had so far, the largest speed buff so far, and it has a very long duration. Additionally, while allies can get it, technically, which is a problem we're going to come back to with Volt's speed buff, for example, Octavia requires you to sync to the music. I don't think people are going to be able to sync to your music in the middle of a race. I don't think you're going to be able to sync to your music in the middle of a race. But if you can, I certainly think you have a better chance than they do. So if you can get the speed, I feel like it's pretty safe. Nobody else is going to get it. And a really critical thing about this is that the duration is long and you can get a stealth with the same ability. So this is kind of a free stealth alongside the speed. And, as usual, that duration and strength benefit infested mobility. So, pretty good. Basically, the only problem here is that you have to actually get the speed buff, and if the duration runs out, I really find it hard to believe that you're going to be able to get the speed buff back in the middle of a race. Like, maybe, maybe. Octavia is a case very much like Protea and Wisp, where they can probably be faster at the start of the race in some way, and Octavia can be faster, theoretically. Octavia runs a different kind of risk that other people will get the buff, and doesn't have that teleporting benefit that Wisp and Protea do, but the speed buff is larger. And she gets stealth, which is very nice. Now the stealth, that's quite likely to be taken by your opponents, your opponents. But not the end of the world. A lot of your competitors will just be tanky, so it doesn't matter. So I think that's fine. Again, that's why I think Octavia is particularly very comparable to Protea and to Wisp. Yes, you will probably be using Narrow-Minded to increase your duration, which will make the range of this smaller. That combined with your music is why it's unlikely, but not impossible, that your fellow competitors will steal your speed buff. But it is possible, so worth mentioning. Finally, we have Saren. This is the part of the tier list where it gets very, very simple, because a lot of the ways that the frames are fast are just, they have a very big speed buff. Saren is, again, like probably the most simple of these, and I'm really happy that Saren is first, because Saren is also the best example of the problem with having another speed buff. Molt doesn't last very long. It has a 40-second duration on the ability description, but that's for the clone you make. Molt has a speed buff on it, and people are surprised every time I say this, but this is Volt's speed buff. It's a Volt level speed buff. It's 50% more sprint speed, just like Volt. The problem is the duration is 5 seconds. That's only half of Volt's duration, and it costs 50 energy, which is more than Volt's costs. This ability is pretty energy hungry. Previously, before Infested Mobility, this was about the most energy, and even then it was like sometimes you'd want to make concessions in your build to generate more energy. I wonder if I still have it built, but previously I had, something like this. So you can see here I've used Prime Flow to gain a big old energy pool, and then the idea is that you can use a Sahasa Krubro, like I mentioned earlier, to tank up. And then at the beginning of a race, you have a pretty large energy pool. Yes, you need to spend it very frequently for these really short, but I mean, even without Infested Mobility, this is real fast. Like it's quick. It's darn quick. Previously, this wasn't much of a disadvantage compared to what Volt has. Now I think it's a little more of a disadvantage. There just isn't much you gain by doing this, which is pretty much exactly the same speed as Volt, except it has half the duration and it costs twice as much energy, and you have another ability to pay for. That's a problem. I do think that's a problem. I do think if a race is short, that's probably not going to come up, but I don't think it's irrelevant. So I put Saren in B tier, not because she isn't real fast, like at normal speed, the same speed as Volt, but because I think the trade-off is that Volt has way better energy economy. You can totally go faster. Remember, you don't have to use Prime Flow necessarily, so that does gain you speed. Having to make concessions for energy, which you definitely have to with Saren with Infested Mobility, that does sacrifice speed. You do go slower because of that. The other thing is that the only thing Saren gains in exchange for that is that Molt cannot be given to allies. Volt's speed can. You can buff allies, right? Or competitors. They are not your friends. And that's bad, but Volt's buff range with narrow-minded on is very, very, very small. It doesn't really come up that much. It is not a non-thing. It will happen eventually, but it's not a huge deal. And at this amount of speed, at the amount of speed that we're talking when I put Infested Mobility on Volt and you see that, I really don't think that it's really helping people that much if you give them another speed buff. Just saying. So that's why I put Saren in B tier. I think it's more of a contextual ranking where if Volt and let's say Zephyr didn't exist, maybe Saren would be an A tier, but because there are Warframes that lose almost nothing compared to Saren, but they have way better energy, and they do the exact same thing otherwise, I feel like that makes Saren relatively worse. You just won't pick her. You just won't choose her, basically. Now, of course, this is the part where we have to mention the weird elephant in the room, which is that Saren has 2 arcane helmets. Oh yes, my greatest nightmare. Saren has an arcane helmet that increases parkour velocity and an arcane helmet that increases movement speed. It doesn't matter, but I absolutely have to tell you that. As far as I can tell, they're both 10%, so not very significant. It looks like they decided, well, Saren can have arcane helmets that split the difference. Nyx gets 20% parkour velocity. I don't know if that's how much it is, but I think that's how much it is. Saren can have 2 that give 10%. That's terrible, but that seems like what happened. So anyway, 2 arcane helmets, there you go. You're welcome for buying those and completely wasting my platinum. Gauss, we're finally at A tier. Obviously, the good thing about Gauss is that you have Mach Rush. And Gauss doesn't have a speed boosting ability naturally, but yeah, now he does. So a thing that will make you say, does this bring joy? Yes, this absolutely brings joy. Ooh! Now see, the problem is that looked insanely fast, but look where we are. And now watch this. It's actually not that fast. But the big thing is it does immediately accelerate you. That's the biggest thing about this, is you can get that ground speed. You can run through door after door after door, and you don't have to worry about acceleration. You can adjust in midair, so you can go like that, you know? It's pretty good. Now, Gauss can be a little energy hungry because you're kind of dashing around and stuff, but it's fast, don't get me wrong. And again, the big thing is that Gauss converts ground running speed into something where you don't need to worry about momentum, which is unique. That is very powerful. You can get overall more sprint speed, and so if you really max that out, that's good stuff. Mach Rush didn't have a speed buff to work with, now it does. So I do think Gauss is A tier. I might be overvaluing him a little bit. I just think that adding control and the ability to avoid acceleration time is really good, and I'm not sure that the insane speed that we're about to get to with Volt, I'm not sure that's really worth that much more. It's way faster. It's much, much faster. I'm just not sure it really matters. We already showed Loki a lot. We just need to talk about what Loki does that is so A tier worthy, because of course, when I was using Loki before, it was just as kind of a benchmark. What's the deal with Loki being up here? Well, of course, it's because of Switch Teleport. This is a pretty ridiculous ability in a race. You're in second, someone is in first, and they are about to get to extraction. You just steal it from them, and then you win. and you win. It stops your momentum, sure. It stops their momentum, sure. But the other thing is, if you're in the lead, you could just use a decoy and teleport to it with Switch Teleport. Now, it's a little clunky. You have to cast a few abilities. Nova is overpowered and banned for her teleport because it's instantaneous. Loki's is not instantaneous. But dude, it's still a teleport. Like, at the end of the day, you're teleporting, you know? You do have to build range for this to be a long range ability. But the thing is, the range is pretty long. It's still a 36 meter swap. Like, and this is with no range. This is full negative range. And so if you add just a little bit more range back in, which you totally can, like just take, this is not doing much. Just take one of these off and use stretch. And then you have 70 meter range. Like, that's fine. You've lost basically nothing. You do need range for this, sure. But the base range is so high. It's good because Loki is not good at anything else, really. Loki is a woeful soul who's had his lunch eaten by lots of other Warframes. And so now he's come to steal a position of excellence. I think Loki is probably the best frame for DriftFrame that is not banned. I feel like the benefit of you just bullet jump and practically nobody is any better at bullet jumping. I don't think you gain enough by running on the ground for that to really be that much better than just bullet jumping. And then you can literally just steal someone's place in the race. You do need good aim to track a fast target. That's true. Your crosshair needs to be on them, not just near them. It's true. But I am not so great at this. And let me tell you, I have raced with this and done it. I didn't do it in that demo because I was distracted. But I have played this in a race and I have been able to do it. If I can do it, I promise you can do it too. It's not easy. It's not. But it is doable. It is absolutely doable. This is not the kind of thing where it's like, okay, but nobody can really control that level of speed. You can. It's doable. This is subjective, but that's my 2 cents. So that's why Loki is in A tier. Nezha. So Nezha, well, it's his slide passive, right? I don't know how controllable that's going to be, which is why we're going to try it and find out. And sure, something like that. A quick note, Firewalker does give you a little bit of speed, but it's not affected by strength. You might as well use it because the duration is very good. You can easily cast it one time for 25 energy. Doesn't Chakram Flight scale with duration rather than range? Oh yes, thank you for reminding me, chat. Yes, the thing that people always mention when I talk about Nezha and people don't understand. This is why it's critical to keep in mind that it's in the context of a race. This is a movement ability, but you got to think back to this huge D tier environment. The Chakram is not faster than you are. You are faster than the Chakram. So because this is a teleport ability that has to travel, and yet unlike things like Wisp's clone, it doesn't stay out long enough for you to, leave it somewhere and then teleport to it later. This is not useful in the context of racing, in my estimation. There are a few corner cases. I've seen people mention that they've used it to cross like a gap. You can use it to fly, right? That's fairly minor though. I wouldn't worry about this ability's power overall. So again, this is Nezha with his Butterscoot with Firewalker as well. And as you can see, like it's very, very fast, but I don't think that you really gain that much from the slide passive. And Firewalker is pretty much free, but still not that amazing. Let's play around with Chakram a little bit. Watch, so we'll throw this out, and then we'll butt scoot. Well, I can't do both at the same time. Yeah, I'm charging it as well. Yeah, so you saw there, like once I got a good angle and I was going fast, you do have similar speed to the Chakram. So that's not particularly powerful in my estimation. Again, if it is, you can prove me wrong. So yeah, Nezha is really fast. The slide does make you faster. It's hard to control. Another thing is there's some kind of weird momentumness, and then Firewalker's kind of a little bit of free speed, not very much. Yeah, you can roll and slide, and that can be a lot faster. I should show that actually. Yeah, you kind of like roll and slide together, and it can be faster. Again, the trouble with this, and the reason that focusing on demonstrations rather than just discussing is not always the best approach, is because I'm just bad at this probably. And so I do think that's worth keeping in mind. Now, the nice thing about, it was mentioned, Volt's insane speed has that downside that is deceleration. Or no, acceleration. Deceleration is not a problem. You can stop on a dime, can't you? But Nezha does have that slipperiness issue. Anyway, we'll move on to Volt. Ah, yes, the piece de resistance. It's infested mobility, Volt. We have to build the strength and go the fast. And again, I'm avoiding using Blind Rage because I believe that you will run out of energy alongside Infested Mobility. However, speed does have only 25 cost and then a decent duration, so it might be a little more okay. I'm still skeptical, but it's just worth noting. Again, this is much more about the conceptual viability of the Warframe, not about the exact build that is the specific best. I don't know, and I think a lot of the time it doesn't really matter. I think that you've seen as we've been going through this that much of the time you need to make concessions for usability or for example, preference. You might simply prefer having the control of not going really, really fast. It's just about using your mod slots efficiently, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. And now we're just gonna add a little more duration. I think this might be enough duration. So we could go Augur Message, or Augur Secrets, and then we can put Power Drift in. As is known, this is going to be very, very fast. Like, there ain't no two ways about it. I'm also gonna talk briefly about Zephyr here because it's pretty much the same deal. Zephyr has that augment for turbulence that gives it a speed multiplier. It's 45% to Volt's 50%, and that's barely any worse. And that's also kind of evened out by the fact that Zephyr has amazing duration. It's really good duration. Zephyr is more energy efficient. You also have Zephyr's Tailwind. That's fine. You do need range, I believe, to make that go far. But not the end of the world. You could add some on if you wanted to. I don't think it's that good, but it's an option. Yeah, Volt, as you can see, takes a long time to accelerate. But once you get to your top speed, it's really something to see. I mean, it's really, really fast, you know? You can kind of seamlessly maintain it, like so. And you can see, like, this running speed is it's really something. Like, it's a lot. It's very fast. But you have to be able to control it, and it's hard. You have to avoid hard landings. You might want to use Kavat's Grace if you're not comfortable sliding. I would get comfortable sliding. That's something you need to be able to do. But golly gee willikers is this fast. And again, Saren can be about this exact speed. You just have to worry about energy. Zephyr can also be this exact speed. So Volt, of course, the concern is that if you get close to people, you'll give them speed, which is kind of bad. I mean, yeah, they might get messed up by it, but it can be bad. Zephyr, the thing is, like, Volt, you only have to worry about them being near you right when you cast it. Zephyr, if they get right on top of you, then you'll give them the speed thing. The thing that's not such a big deal about that is that if they go faster than you, they will, you know, leave your speed field and lose the speed. Whereas Volt, you lock in. I view Zephyr and Volt as being pretty much equivalent. Obviously, Zephyr has a lot better energy efficiency, is a little slower. I think those things mostly even out. You're going at such a crazy speed, you're not going to actually reach the top speed most of the time anyway. You really want to do some concessions for slide mods, which I didn't do here. I just wanted to show you the running speed. But anyway, I feel like they are pretty much the same. It's mostly, do you like the floaty passive? Oh, it's 45%. I mean 40%, not 45% like I keep saying. I could have sworn it was 45, huh? Anyway, 40% is a little meaningful slower. But yeah, the duration is just, it's pretty good. It's twice as much as Volts. So 20 duration, that's pretty good. If you use mostly max duration, you won't need to recast it, which is good. But anyway, you get the idea. Kind of the same, and both very, very fast. Definitely of the ground speed Warframes, these are the fastest by a lot. Gauss has much better acceleration. Saren is kind of the same, and it's just a matter of having enough energy. Although it is worth noting that in A tier, most of these Warframes are pretty squishy, except for Nezha has his Halo. Korra's not too bad, you're mostly fine. Octavia can be invisible. For Wisp, you could use a health reservoir, and it should last for the whole mission, and then you will be unkillable. You'll have to do that without giving it to allies, without giving them that benefit, but whatever. Zephyr's Turbulence, a big difference from Volt, finally, is that it deflects bullets. Now, there is a weirdness here, where it deflects bullets in a radius based on range, not on strength, which will probably be negative, probably should be negative. That's something to worry about, but it will still defend you against some incoming fire. Finally, quickly, we'll just do the yearly tradition of going over the ban list. Titania, it's because she can fly at unbeatable speed with her Razorwing Blitz augment. This is an augment that lets you stack a lot of fire rate for normal gameplay, but an awful lot of flight speed, 4 times, that is affected by strength. Even with this just whatever average amount of strength, look at how fast this is. I'm not going to demonstrate, for example, Nova. It's a teleport. What do you want from me? But this, like, even with just whatever strength, it's not even that much strength. Oh, baby. Yeah, you remember when we were running here with Volt? That leaves you in the dust. Leaves you absolutely in the dust. This is like, it's not even a contest. This is just like nothing like a different realm of existence compared to, and you're flying, like you get to just go over terrain. You remember what I said before about hard landings on Volt? Ha! Hard landings, what's that? Now this is the part of the stream where we have to talk about how I'm not unbanning Titania, but banning Razorwing Blitz, because Titania has nothing else relevant to DriftFrame except for this little pixie dust fart cloud that you make when you bullet jump, or it works some different way, I don't remember exactly. It's just not powerful enough to be a big loss, so I'm not including it. It's just not all that significant. And likewise with the other Warframes, they just don't really have anything else that's worth writing home about in DriftFrame, and so we're not unbanning them, but then banning the ability. The other thing is, this is something that I'm telling people about on the internet, so we can't just make it super overcomplicated and then say, oh, remember all the fine details, you know, and how do you make sure people don't have the thing? You know, I think that this is best when you don't have to police it at all, and so that's why I make the rule that way. Oh yeah, you also have Blink, lol. Nova, again, doesn't really bear mentioning. Nova can teleport, so clearly that's overpowered as long as you practice. Again, I kind of view them in a progression where Wukong is really easy to use, but the least overpowered, and then Titania is kind of in the middle. It is hard to steer in a hallway style mission, but it's been proven to me time and time again that although it's hard to steer Titania in a hallway, it is far from impossible. People can do it. Wukong, however, it's very easy to steer. And we'll show that in a minute with Cloudwalker. He's just not as fast. And then Nova, it's even harder. You have to really practice the teleports, but it's instant. And if you're practiced, there's really no room for error either. So anyway, they're all at a speed where DriftFrame would not work if these were allowed. So we'll very quickly show Wukong. I'm going to show Wukong's relative speed. So I'll go out there with like some sprint speed, and you can see that Wukong is fast, but not nearly as fast as Titania. But in a mission, it's a lot easier to control, and it's also very energy efficient. You can do it basically as much as you want, whereas Titania, you do have to be a little bit careful about the amount of energy you're using. I mean, you're going to finish the race so fast it doesn't even matter, but could theoretically maybe matter a tiny bit, whereas this, like, you could do this for a long time. Now, as you can see, this is a lot less fast than what we've been seeing. There are definitely frames in our roster that can beat this level of speed, but it's not to be underestimated how fast this is. You remember when we were bullet jumping around before? So all those Warframes in the lower tiers? This doesn't look fast, but it is faster than that. Not by a whole lot, but it is. And the big thing is it's just way too accessible. It's so fast. Again, it's not crazy fast compared to the things we've been seeing, but it's very fast, and you get to fly over terrain. So that's why. There you go. So, yeah, now it's time to race.